Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of SpectrumCast. We're going to try something out a little bit different here today, and we're going to have Sean be our host and our moderator. Sean, over to you.
Okay, so today on SpectrumCast, we have the usual participants. Myself, my name is Sean Sperry, and we also have Steve Kinniston, Tricia Zhang, and Randy Arsenault. Okay, so today's topic is data protection for containers, which I think is a pretty timely topic since we're seeing a lot of activity in this area and a lot of information coming down about why this is a hot new subject. And in the way of background, I think I'd like to start with Randy and get him to talk a little bit about why containerization is important in today's compute environment.
Sure. Thanks, Sean. So containerization is a very rapidly growing trend and emerging trend, although you could argue it's not really trendy anymore. It's been happening for several years now, but containerization microservices are really becoming the new architecture of workloads by default almost. So if you look at any analyst report, if you look at any external, kind of analysis of IT in the industry, you'll see that, upwards of 90% of all new workloads are being developed in containerization or containerized form factors. So it is becoming the de facto standard. From our perspective, now that IBM and Red Hat are together, we are now the de facto leader in the containerization space with the Red Hat OpenShift container platform. So that trend is going to continue to grow and expand, and it gives us a great position to kind of maintain and stretch out that leadership position in the industry by servicing our clients with a real full stack solution. So if you think about Cloud Paks as kind of the deployment mechanism of choice going forward, and our storage suite for Cloud Paks, including all the data services that come along with that, it's really a complete full stack story from the application and workload all the way down to that data persistence fabric layer. So we are poised to be the leader in this containerized development trend and workload environment as it continues to grow and evolve, and data protection becomes a critical part of that. And frankly, I think we'll talk more about it. Data protection's lagging a little bit in some of these enterprise class containerized workloads, and we have an opportunity to really improve the position of IBM and Red Hat.
So that's kind of a good segue, and maybe I'll turn to Steve for this. Maybe you can talk a little bit about why data protection is important in a containerized environment, or if it is important. I know a lot of these container environments are transient by their very nature, right? So do we still need data protection? Do we still care about it as much as we used to?
That's an excellent point, Sean. I'm glad you started out with that, because Randy and I have often had a lot of conversations about, the need of, when containers first became popular, the need to have protection for containers was almost non-existent, right? The hope was that containers were actually being able to host processing power and be able to spin up new applications, to be able to host any new number of users coming in to access that backend data, but they weren't generating the data, so to speak, in the beginning. So at first, maybe a year ago, because as Randy said, this really isn't that new, there probably wasn't a whole bunch of need to have data protection for containers. But we're seeing this shift over to containers being able to, or the need for containers to be able to take advantage of persistent storage. So now it's not just the application driving the processing power, it's also the engine that's driving the data creation and that sort of thing. And just like every application out there, whether it be virtual or any application sitting on a virtual system, a physical system or whatever, these applications need protection, right? And you're starting to see a host of different players in the market to be able to do the protection of container-based workloads. Just like, for example, a lot of the different data protection solutions in the market for a virtual environment leverage the underpinning APIs to be able to do things like create application consistency, crash consistency, and that sort of thing. We're doing the same thing, right? And a lot of vendors are doing the same thing. How can I take advantage of the underlying componentry within the software, and whether it be Kubernetes or OpenShift or whatnot, to be able to create these not only a backup copy, but a crash consistent copy if I'm working with just general data, or an application consistent copy for things like databases and that sort of thing. So it's coming. It's big. It's becoming more and more important every day as we run these different cloud packs, as Randy spoke about, or as we create more of these cloud packs that are driving more data creation. It's going to become even more of a bigger need.
And I think this is also the persistent versus non-persistent is where, even though containers aren't new, the people that are being exposed to them, the people that are implementing them are changing. And that's going to then circle back to, okay, now this data needs to be protected. And that brings in your data protection folks as well.
Well, that's kind of a good segue to my next question, Tricia, is maybe you can talk about a little bit about the traditional roles of people in a computing enterprise with regard to containers and how that's changing with regard to containers as they come onto the forefront of computing.
Yeah, so a lot of the containers are done inside of Kubernetes at your command line with kube control. And so you have these Kubernetes administrators who are very focused and very familiar with the applications, with the volumes that are out there running, and have been the ones in the beginning who were driving the request to have these different volumes backed up. But as we move up the application level, we see the other more traditional backup folks saying, okay, yeah, I want to be able to not only access this via kube control command line, but also via my backup interface and have control of it from not only the kube control, but also the backup side of the applications. And so that's not only changing how we do the backups, but what gets backed up, where it gets stored. Is it getting stored just traditionally inside of Kubernetes itself, or am I now offloading those backups to products like Spectrum Protect Plus and the storage underneath those?
Yeah. I think I would say also that some of that has to do with scale as well, right? I mean, as Steve said, a lot of new applications are going the container microservices route. And if you have one or two groups or one or two applications in your entire enterprise using this technology, it's a lot more manageable and it's a lot less subject to the typical processes of the enterprise. But as you scale that up and get more and more applications that are more and more critical to the everyday running of your business, right? You have to impose the discipline of those processes. And a lot of times that means maybe going to a central group or having rules and auditing and things along that nature.
And it's also about what are you backing up? Are you just backing up the volumes? Are you moving up the chain and backing up the clusters? Am I backing up the more at a container level, a pod level, or at an application level? And that also changes the perspective of who's involved and where the data is being stored and what kind of processes are involved.
I think as time moves forward, we're seeing, Tricia, to your point, that this who's involved is definitely changing, right? It's not just the backup administrator anymore, and it's not just the IT team that's focused on the systems, and Randy can attest to this very well. When containers start to come into the workplace, right, now it's more about different folks in different lines of business, whether it be the DevOps people or whether it be the lines of business or the marketing folks or whomever's writing small applications, small microservices that are building these. The business, the corporation, still has a requirement to meet any corporate regulation with regard to protecting information, especially if I'm in a regulated industry. The vendors are out there speaking to the different lines of business now, not just IT, about data protection. But again, IT is accountable for, yeah, we're protecting the data, right? So having conversations with as many people in your organization to understand, you know, what's being done, what type of data is being protected. This is where, to my feeling, is that data classification really comes in importantly. That you understand what data is being created, what types of regulations it may or may not fall under, what does it fall under with regard to corporate governance, and then how is it being protected, and overall, is it do we have consistency, right? Because that's the thing that's going to help lower the cost and keep the cost at a reasonable perspective for this particular add-on to not just building the application but protecting the application as well.
Yeah, and I It also makes the formulation and implementation of policy more challenging, right? Because in the old monolithic world, you had basically one place to go. To your point, you had, one person or one small group that was responsible for data protection, security, and sovereignty. Now, as it becomes increasingly distributed and increasingly outside your firewall, that creates a whole new set of challenges around developing policies at the appropriately granular level, for containers and microservices, so that you don't have a vulnerability that maybe doesn't expose itself until you burst out to the cloud to fulfill a specific demand requirement or something along those.
And also, cleaning up all these backups that are being created and keeping track of them. We don't want to be consuming tons of space by having backups all over the place.
Yep. Okay, so I mean, I think that's some good background. Maybe right now, maybe we can go around the room and kind of ask everybody or talk to everybody. You mentioned that containers have kind of been around for a long while now, maybe years, but at this point they're starting to get more and more accepted and scaling more and more, making their way more and more to the enterprise. From a data protection point of view, do you think that we are totally there yet, or is data protection for these type of containers really ready for prime time? Or what's the future of data protection for these type of containers? I don't know, maybe Steve, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think I look at it as the life of containers is going to take on a half-life similar to what virtual environments did, right? So if it took 20 years for virtualization to be ubiquitous in a lot of accounts, when I walk into a client and talk to them today, and you ask how virtualized are you, they're in the 80 to 90%, north of 75 usually, right? For us to get there with containers is going to take half as long as it did with virtualization. That said, as Randy said, it's out there today. It's being used in development environments, and there's a lot of testing going on with it. But pretty soon, right, there's going to be the need to be able to protect all of that data being created by these containers. There is today, but I mean, it's going to grow rapidly. Today, as we said before, there's a handful of vendors that are doing this. IBM is working. Today, we support, and Tricia, you actually did the demonstration when we launched the support for Kubernetes. Integrated right into Kubernetes. You can back up through Kubernetes. We're over the course of the next quarter, we're going to be integrating it into so that you can see all the backup policies and that sort of thing in Protect Plus as well. And it's going to continue to grow and evolve. And the nice thing I appreciate is that we started on this trend early, unlike what we did with VMware. So I think we're in a good spot to align with the speed in which clients are going to deploy.
Tricia, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I already see us making massive progress. Last year, this time when we were talking about this, we had competitors who were still basically mounting those PVCs and doing file level backups against them. And when Spectrum Protect Plus came out, we were able to take the snapshots directly inside of the Kubernetes environment. And we're already seeing the raising of not just the data, but also of the entire infrastructure behind those pods to be able to protect everything. And just like in VMware, not just protecting the data that's out there, but also the entire VM itself. And so as we raise the Spectre, as the tools inside of Kubernetes catch up with where we're going, this is just going to keep on that projectile of going, improving and increasing of what we can do and how we do it.
Yeah, I will say also too, from watching this from the inside, I've also seen a lot of progress with regard to the ease of use of this technology, right? I mean, basically, we used to, when we first came out, very much catered to a developer type of mentality where everything was kind of files and you needed a lot of detailed knowledge. And as we're moving forward, we're slowly making that to a point where the developer is still comfortable using the technology, but also for those people who are less comfortable with the details of it, we're adding it to a GUI and making it a lot easier to use for them. And I think that trend is going to continue Randy, anything to
Yeah,
add
I would just
to
say
that?
that, data protection, like most enterprise kind of data services, are really table stakes now. Like if you're deploying a production ready application in an enterprise or a government agency or, pick the environment, the ability to protect that data, restore to a point in time, give yourself the proper cyber resiliency posture is mandatory. It's not optional. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have. So the sooner we can deliver, and I think as we've all said, we're aggressively moving in this direction to get out ahead of the demand, the faster we can deliver reliable, repeatable, simple, easy to use, easy to scale data protection and recovery services to containers, the more we will also help foster additional growth. That will be kind of an accelerant, I think, that will help container application environments get adopted even more rapidly. So it puts us in a good position, I think, to really drive.
Not only is it table stakes to be able to do it, but also to be able to demonstrate that you are doing it and have it an auditable function, right? Because as was mentioned a little earlier, a lot of our customers and a lot of the people that are starting to use this technology are very highly regulated industries that really need to be able to demonstrate that they're following proper processes and conforming to the details of what needs to happen in such an industry.
And I
Steve,
think
go
the
ahead.
big,
You were going to say something?
yeah, I was going to say, I think the big takeaway here is not only do we need to be able to understand, to your point, what kind of industry are you in, what type of data are you creating, and that sort of thing. But I think containers is broadening who is creating this data and how it's being created, right? So the big takeaway is, are we sure that we're getting in front of the right people, having the right conversations about the data that's being created, about the data that's being protected, such that, they understand what they're getting themselves into by, trying to whip up a new container, but also that, IT is accountable for that data, they're accountable for that data, and just to make sure that protection is a key thing. Just because I have something I can create some data with, I also need to protect that data, and it's imperative. And I think in the beginning, a lot of data is going to get missed because folks haven't thought about the back end of, once the data is created, what should happen.
Yeah, it puts a lot of demand on kind of data life cycle as we sort of traditionally think about it, but in this new containerized, elastic, highly distributed world. And it also, because of all these, one of the big advantages of working with Red Hat and having Red Hat now as part of the family is that gives us as a combined entity access to buying centers and users and personas and constituencies where we had less of a presence before. So now we have direct access to these huge DevOps communities and these, CI/CD type environments, which is a good way for us to communicate the data protection message to that broader audience and do so under the banner of the industry leader. So I think, again, I keep coming back to this, but we're in a really good position to be able to exploit that as we take these solutions to market and, get out ahead of the demand, number one, and be able to tell a very compelling story from a position of domain expertise across that whole environment.
Okay, very good. I think that's a good place to wrap it up for this session. I would like to mention before I leave that upcoming in the end of October, we will be sponsoring IBM's Technical University, and that covers systems, storage, and Z as well, and a lot of deep technical knowledge about subjects such as this and other subjects. I know we have at least 4 or 5 different sessions on containers there. So I would encourage you to sign up for that. Depending on where you're consuming this content, hopefully there'll be a link in the bottom that you can just click on to get to the registration page. Or if that's not the case, if you just Google IBM Technical University, Systems Technical University, you'll find.
We're also going to be doing a big product launch at TechU as well.
And I was going to add to that, the next release of Spectrum Protect Plus is really going to have some great additions to the protection of containers.
Yep. A lot of exciting stuff. A lot of that will be revealed at TechU as well. So that's the place to be if you want to get be in front of this.
This is the teaser reel for that.
They're a sponsor of the blog. Okay. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. And as always, if you have any questions, reach out to us. We're on a lot of different social media, and we look forward to hearing from you and seeing you next time we do one of these. Take care.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks all.